What does Walking Miracles Family Foundation do?
We help newly diagnosed families and cancer survivors who've been impacted by childhood, adolescent, and young adult cancer. So age ranges would be from 2 to 39. So children go from 2 to 14. Adolescents are from 15 to 20. And then young adults start at 21 and go to 39.
And what was the inspiration behind the foundation?
Well, I'm actually a childhood and adolescent cancer survivor myself. So I was diagnosed in 1974 with ALL leukemia. At that time, originally I'm from Charleston. They told my parents I would have less than 10% chance of making it then at the age of 2, and that I probably would only live a year. So 5.5 years later, I finished that round of treatment for my ALL, and God's calendar planning was a little different than everybody else's. So I was in what they call remission, which means not having any treatment for about a year and a half, and I relapsed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They found the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in my neck. I was 9 at the time. It had wrapped around my throat and was trying to choke me out. So they had to do mass amounts of radiation and more chemo to the chest area there. We found out at that point that I have a difficult time with anesthesia and my tongue swells. And it blocked the airway, and I blue coated twice during my non-Hodgkin's battle. And so after being revived, I had another 3.5 years or 3 more years of treatment until I was 12. And then I stopped again. And so the name Walking Miracles actually came from my grandmother, who has now passed away. She was diagnosed with breast cancer at 93 and didn't live. She died just short of her 96th birthday, but she was a devout Christian woman and called me a walking miracle the first time. The second time made it even more apparent, and then that's kind of where Walking Miracles name came from.
Wonderful. Yeah. You have a really, powerful story, and
thank you.
How does it feel, going through what you've gone through, and now, being able to give back, to people that are going through the same thing that you went through?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily that the time frames are different now from when I was going through it, but there were a lot of difficulties that people don't see. The kids go and they get their chemo, and my day started where I would get up in the morning and I'd go to blood work, or I'd go get a chest x-ray, or if I had to have radiation, they'd take me to the radiation room, and then I'd go up and sit and wait in the doctor's office for hours on end waiting to get my chemo, and I'd have to sit there and let it drip for 2 to 3 hours in the day. And then if I felt like going to school by that time, sometimes it was 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, but I wouldn't be there very long. It may not be the same way now, but I had been bullied as a child because I was bald and I was fat and I was on all these drugs and stuff for the chemo, and then I was also on prednisone, and so I was overweight most of my life, and so that makes people an easy target to be bullied and made fun of by other kids that don't understand. And there was a lot of and I don't mean this in a negative way, ignorance on what really happens to somebody that goes through cancer, and I can't sneeze on you and give it to you, or that kind of thing. So it really is something that, as I was going through this, my mother was a master's degree teacher, my dad was a master's degree teacher, my grandma was a master's degree teacher, but nobody had a master's degree in cancer. And they didn't know how to do anything. And they didn't know how to navigate the medical system. And all we did was basically follow what the doctors told us, and we didn't really have any other guidance other than that. We didn't have any resources other than that. There wasn't anything really there available to do that. And so when I went into survivorship at 12, I'll never forget when I walked out of the building, and at that time they didn't even have bells for people to have some sort of, hey, I made it through. They said, good luck to you, hope everything goes well, and go be normal. And I looked at my mom at the age of 12 and I was like, what does that mean? I spent 8 years of my life in the hospital. Now you're telling me to go integrate with kids that I can't integrate with anyway because I'd spent most of my grade school years, high school years, and college years with the same, or grade school, junior high and high school with all the same kids, and none of them liked me, and I didn't really have a whole lot of friends or people that I could talk to, and the people that I did have were all older than me because it was either my older brother's friends, who's 5 years older than I am, or my mom's friends, because they were always the people that took care of me. And it was really hard to develop relationships. And then I was just supposed to magically go figure this out. Mm-hmm. Well, what ended up happening was I started having long-term side effects from the treatments. Like, I couldn't do math, I couldn't do reading comprehension, I was having different issues. I had a bunch of cognitive processing issues, like with memory and taking too long to kind of get information from my brain to get it into action. And nobody really knew any of this stuff. So then not only was I trying to go be normal, but then I was tested for everything. And then, you know, I added another label because I had a disability. So then I was one of the kids that got a 504 plan or an IEP because I was somebody that needed assistance in trying to build a different toolbox for myself to get through school. But it just kind of added on, and it was difficult. And so I just didn't want the kids today or the families today to deal with it that way because there's no reason that it should have to happen like that. And so our ultimate goal is not just to give you a piece of paper or here's this resource or here's a travel card and good luck to you. We want to walk people through from the time they're diagnosed until they tell us they don't need us anymore. And that can be whenever that would be. I'm 50 now. I just turned 50 last year. But at 35, I had my first heart failure scare. I didn't even know what I was supposed to look for. Nobody bothered me to tell me anything about what to look for later in life. I didn't have any guidelines. I didn't have any of that. At 40, I had my aortic valve replaced. And so the other thing that sort of kind of came along with that as I got older is I had all this medical debt building up, and I had either no insurance at the times that I did have work, or I did have insurance at the time that I was working, but I hadn't paid off the bills from before. And so all of that pressure was mounting up, and I didn't know how to deal with it personally. And so it was kind of just like that snowball effect happening. And then a year after I had my pacemaker put in, and I had that aortic valve replacement, I had to go to Cleveland Clinic for that. So luckily I had gone on a clinical trial and that was done, but the anesthesia issue showed up again. And so we had to find a unique way to deal with that. And then the year after that, I had to have my first pacemaker replaced with a second. And so it's not like the side effects stop. In fact, the side effects for most of that radiation and chemo that I had started at 30 and 40. And people don't know that. And I didn't know it. And I was like, well, I've lived like 15 years already without any signs of cancer. And the last time I went back to a doctor's office, I had to take off of work. I lost a day of pay. Didn't have any insurance to cover the cost. I go in, I do the blood work, I do the x-ray, I do all the tests. I run up another bill for somebody to tell me, hey, we didn't see cancer this time. And I was like, I'm lost here. So the other frustrating thing that I dealt with was not knowing what to do for myself, but I'm one of these persistent people that just keeps nagging at stuff until I get it and figure it out. And I don't care who I have to ask to get it. But not everybody's that way. But I also didn't have the medical knowledge because I'm not a doctor. Like, you know, I'm the average person trying to get an answer for something that happened to me some 20 years before, 3 decades before, and, you know, certain things start happening. So then I found out about 3 years ago, after all the heart stuff went away, I was like, okay, I'm really still having challenges from my weight. Well, I was on prednisone for 8 years, and I didn't know that prednisone could cause type 2 diabetes. And so I'm going to the weight clinic at WVU and I'm asking these people like, oh yeah, that can happen. And I'm like, how long have you known that? Oh, like several years. And I'm like, why is nobody educating? And so that's part of the reason that we created Walking Miracles, is so people could be educated along to know what to do for themselves later on. Because if they're not going to get it at the hospital once they leave, who's going to help them?
Definitely. And what type of, services and resources does Walking Miracles offer that, especially from your experience that you had, what type of, resources and services do you all offer that are the most beneficial that, that you've seen, that you weren't able to get,
So, we basically try to interview as many families as we can and say, here's what we have, but what do you need? Because it's not about what I need. It's about what are you needing now that I maybe forgot about or didn't have to deal with, or that kind of thing. So one of the things that we found out, the biggest barrier to care in the state is travel. The average drive to Morgantown is 2 hours to 3 hours for some people living in rural West Virginia. That's one way. They don't have the money. Charleston, same distance. You come from Beckley to Charleston, that's another $8 on tolls. You go to Huntington, that's the same difference, 2 to 3 hours, one way. So 6 hours if you can go home. Most people can't. So then you're looking at food, you're looking at gas, you're looking at lodging, and how do I come up with that money if we are only living on one income? And then the challenge becomes, okay, what if we were on a dual income and we're living at a dual income level, and now my wife has to quit work because somebody has to take the child because now they're in a cancer protocol. Mine, I'm just going to throw the example out, was 3 years. It wasn't 1 day a week. It could have been 2 or 3 days a week that I had to go back. And then if my counts weren't right, they didn't let me go home. I was in the hospital. And so there's this part of things that people don't see. So we started a travel card. And the travel program allows families to apply online at our website at walkingmiracles.org under our contact page, so that they can send an email to me, Brett at walkingmiracles.org, or my nurse navigator. Her name is Casey at walkingmiracles.org. And basically once we get that application, we find out if do they need a tablet. We offer every family a tablet, whether that's an iPad or whether that is an Android tablet. And then we just recently finished, finally, our port shirts. So we have dry fit shirts that they can wear that have zippers here so that they can put their shirt on. And so if they don't ruin their good clothes, or if they get sick during chemo, they can just throw up on it and wipe it off and go on about their business. And then the other thing is my master's in counseling. And I always knew that psychological services needed to be available, but it wasn't a hot button when I got my degree. So we connect them to places like Family Care, or Valley Health, or Prestera, or other organizations that we know of statewide that can help with counseling services for the families, because it's needed. And not everybody knows they need it, but it can be very overwhelming. And then I also, after I got my master's in counseling, a few years later got certified as what we call patient navigator. And basically the navigator is the person that says, what do finances look like? What resources can we find for that? What do you understand about your cancer? What do you understand about what the treatments do? And we have the nurse navigator, Casey, kind of explains all that because she has a history of working in the field and has worked with survivors, so that she can address the issues so that we can get them connected to proper coordinated care. That may not be driving to Charleston. That may not be driving to all these big city places. These other community health centers may be in their community, and it may not be that they have to drive that far. So if we can save them the driving, why not try, right? Or if we can do, because we do have the capability to do stuff via video, telehealth, Zoom, whatever. So if that's an easier way for somebody to connect to us to help them, then that's something else that we offer. But we're really interested in reaching out to cancer survivors like myself, because a lot of people don't have what we call a survivorship plan, and I didn't have one. By the time I went to go get my medical records to figure out my history, because my medical record was my mother's 78 years old. Had my mother not talked to me about what had happened in my life and for me to be educated on know what to do for me, I would have no medical records whatsoever, because my medical records at the hospital were destroyed for all those years that I was treated, and I had nothing except I had the protocol pages from my original treatments that, thank God, my mother kept, and her calendars. And so what this survivorship plan does is basically say, here's when you were diagnosed, here's what you were treated with, here are some of the side effects to expect, here are the areas of your body that could be affected, and here's the follow-up things that we need to do on a consistent basis to make sure those things are working correctly. And in having that gives me the blueprint as a mother. Now, a lot of people give that late, afterwards. I think it should be given, personal opinion, in the beginning. Because then that way I can see, follow, understand. I'm seeing this now. I need to get this help, not later on down the line. And we also have connected in recent years with helping women and men that are having problems with fertility issues, because that is a huge issue for a lot of people now. And the problem with insurance is a lot of them consider that kind of thing elective, but for cancer patients it's not. And especially for children or people that get their chemo at a young age before they even develop, they have the opportunity not to be able to have kids. So that's kind of shot. And so it can also cause hormone problems and that kind of thing, which have to be dealt with. And then we also found out, like I said, with the prednisone thing, why do they need to be, overweight during their childhood if this is something that's a known thing? Why can't we go back and educate and say, hey, we need to look at this because we see this going on, right? And then that way, that leads to a better quality of life in the end.
Definitely. And yeah, this sounds like, a really wonderful, organization, especially because, it seems as though you're trying to get ahead of, what's going on here, instead of just waiting and be like, well, now this is a problem, so we have to handle it. You're being proactive, about a lot of things.
We're trying to be preventative. We're trying to get people to see ahead of time and have a game plan to know what to do, not to scare people. Mm-hmm. But the most frustrating thing is to know that you have something wrong in your body and to feel like people are gaslighting you, like you're crazy, when you know that that's the issue, right? And so for years, people kept saying to me, with the example of the diabetes, oh, it's your weight. Oh, it's because you don't work out. Oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because of that. Well, according to the weight clinic, after they found out that I had this problem, they had got me on some proper medication that could work with my sugars the right way, and I ended up losing weight on this medication to get myself down. And they were like, no, it has nothing to do with that, because you had prednisone. It did not affect you at a skin level, it affected you at a cellular level, and there's nothing that one can do to fix that. Well, how in the heck am I going to know that unless somebody explains it, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other thing that we try to do is, I have blonde hair, as you can see, so I like to keep things on a second grade level. And that's how my nurse practitioner works. And we just want to educate and help. And if we can't get answers to if we don't have the answer to the question, let me say it that way, we can get it. Because we have the networks and we just want to connect people to whatever it is that they need so that later on they can feel good about themselves. And another program that we're kind of throwing around is a program specifically for women, so that we can work on what does it mean for you to have your hair back, or what does it mean for you to feel pretty again, or would you need something with helping with makeup now that you've had all this stuff, or do you want somebody that could guide you with picking the right clothes now because maybe you've either gained weight or lose weight or whatever and you want to feel good about yourself. So that's another program that I've kind of been throwing the idea around of being able to do that, because I know that cancer for women is psychologically different than it is for men. And there are certain things that they identify with that makes them feel good about themselves. And it's all about, in the end, feeling good about yourselves. And honestly, we just want to be a light of hope. I mean, I didn't do what I did. And the only difference that separates me from all the kids that may have passed away is that my body was able to tolerate what they gave me. And that's the only reason that, honestly, I'm here to help other people get through it. You know, I don't have any magical powers. I'm, not any of that. But, if we can make it easier for other people, why not?
Definitely. I think that's a great ending point there. I'll definitely include that in our final, package. So thank you so much, for joining us. And
yeah, it was my pleasure. And, I know sometimes I can get winded, but
oh no, you're fine.
I just have a passion to fix it.
Yes.
I'm tired of the can being kicked down the road.
Definitely.
I'm tired of people not having the resources that they need to have, and there's no reason for it. I left West Virginia 20 plus years ago. I came back because I was having heart problems and I didn't have any insurance, and it was the same thing. And one of the scary things, and I'll say this before I leave, I had a friend that worked in an insurance company, and just out of spite, I said, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you get me numbers of the number of people that are in your database that were children that were either diagnosed or in the database, and also for young adults? When I saw the numbers, I cried, because there were 789 children in that database, and one child's enough, two's way more, and the impact of childhood cancer is not small in the state of West Virginia. When I saw the numbers for the young adults and the adolescents, so we're talking 15 to 39, it was 3,333 people. No one hears about these people. Yeah. These people don't know what to do for themselves. They don't know how to help themselves. And that was just one insurance company. Now, I know and they were Medicaid based. It wasn't private insurance. I think there are 4 Medicaid companies in the state of West Virginia. Multiply 4 by that number, that was like 4,444 people. That's not a small percentage of people.
At all.
And some of them aren't necessarily able, I should say, to stay in state. They have to go out of state. So now you're talking, drive to Cincinnati, drive to Columbus, drive to Cleveland, drive to UVA, drive to Children's in Asheville, drive to Johns Hopkins in Maryland because you live in the border counties. Drive to Pittsburgh because WVU may not be able to help. And I don't understand how my parents did it either. And so there's a problem that needs to be solved, so let's solve the problem.
Definitely. And I'm really hoping, this story is really going to help people see what the problem is and, drive more people to Walking Miracles.
And that's the thing, is we want people to come to the website, but not because we're trying to get them to like crap. Mm-hmm. And I don't care if you follow us, because that doesn't mean anything. But if you're not spreading the word that, hey, we're here, we can't help. And the great thing is the state government listened to my story and what I was trying to do, and we got state funding and all of that. But we need the people to ask. And unfortunately in West Virginia, everybody's always worse than somebody else. Mm-hmm. But no one's any worse when it comes to cancer. Because cancer doesn't see color. It doesn't see income. It doesn't see any of that stuff. It doesn't see your title at the job. It doesn't see any of that. It doesn't care. Yeah. And all that stuff, when you have a major health challenge, goes away anyway. Because at any point, all of that stuff could be gone. And then if you have nobody to help you, it's really hard. So anyway, I could babble. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. That's really great. Oh, thank you, Tiny. I think we're good.
Yeah, thanks, Tiny. Sorry about the overflow.
No, that's good. We love guests that